With the launch of Disney Plus, millennials and older Gen Z kids got the opportunity to revisit the Disney Channel shows of their youth: Boy Meets World, Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Wizards of Waverly Place, and more. Disney is a terrifying corporation that will soon monopolize all of entertainment, but until then, the other major kids network is a Viacom property whose streaming options are limited through a partnership with Netflix. Their streaming service has quite a few animated classics from Nickelodeon, like Invader Zim and Hey Arnold, but only 2 live-action shows, Victorious and Sam and Cat. At the moment, Ariana Grande is by far the biggest Nickelodeon alum, which probably explains why the 2 shows she once starred in are the ones that Netflix paid to license. These shows, like almost every beloved live-action show on the network from the past 25 years, were creations of Nickelodeon mega producer Dan Schneider. I don't think the streaming era will be kind to him. A common sensibility among writers of kids media is that their work can contain jokes for both children and their parents who may be watching with them, references to classic media that kids wouldn't get, wordplay too clever for kids to grasp, and occasionally raunchy humor meant to go over kids' heads. The latter has been the source of listicles since millennials grew old enough to revisit the media of our youth and write about it on the internet. You can disagree with this concept on a creative level. I know that I personally grew tired of references that I recognize only as references, like every cartoon on every channel, including an I am your father reveal, but it's another thing to disagree about it on a moral level. It becomes a moral concern when you revisit a Schneider show, a former teen actor himself from a time when that meant filming small movies in your hometown. Schneider has said that he earned his actors' trust by sharing his experience and offering to fill the role of acting coach when they needed help with a scene. He created a star system within Nickelodeon by creating spin-offs with the breakout actors on many of his shows. For example, All That's Jamie Lynn Spears became the lead on Zoey 101, while their co-star Victoria Justice would get her own show with Victorious, Drake, and Josh was an Amanda Show spin-off, which led to Miranda Cosgrove's starring turn on iCarly. His shows were hits, building such confidence from Nickelodeon that they once ordered a full season of a Schneider show before he had any details of the plot, cast, or title. There are very few people in the entertainment business who have the level of creative control that I do, he admitted. It was surprising to some entertainment writers when Nickelodeon somewhat abruptly cut ties with Schneider in 2018, but to many outside observers, the firing was long overdue. The most obvious criticism of Schneider is his readily apparent foot fetish, seen both in his work and his off-camera activities, which is so well known at this point that it's become a tired joke on Twitter. It's impossible to unsee his fixation once you know about it. Schneider's characters make bets where the loser has to massage a winner's feet, they get dared to squirt ketchup all over their feet, or challenged to suck their own toes. An entire episode of his show Victorious involves the characters discovering a new treatment for their super smooth feet, which they show off by having other characters stroke their feet. Schneider also used his Twitter account to share pictures of his female stars' toes, and the official account for his show, Sam and Cat, once tweeted a challenge to kids to share pictures of their feet with the show's hashtag written on the soles. These incidents speak to a pattern of disguising a fetish with wacky comedy plots or punchlines, sexualizing minors in a way they did not consent to. Victoria seems to be the worst example of another criticism of Schneider, his overt sexualization of young girls on his shows. It is surely not a coincidence that Victorious is one of the later shows he produced for the network. Presumably, he could get away with more after so much success for so long. Victoria centers on students at a performing arts school with musical numbers that gave an excuse for tight, revealing costumes and suggestive choreography. Schneider himself fawned over the young girls on his show, gushing on his public blog about how gorgeous the actresses were, showing a clear lack of boundaries as their employer and as an adult overseeing teens. Victorious included frequent innuendos and inappropriate jokes, and Schneider's scripts also concocted bizarre circumstances for his young actors that would play as sexual when filmed. Schneider was Nickelodeon's most profile producer, and the rumors about him have remained just that, but the network has had multiple cases of behind-the-scenes predation that have received less attention. It's clear that Nickelodeon failed to create a safe environment for the hundreds of children and young teens who worked on its shows, and empowered predators to take advantage of the access their positions gave them. It's deeply disturbing to revisit the shows of your childhood and realize that the children on screen were being exploited. They had no power in their situation. They were too young to understand the undertones of what they were performing. Without their consent and without strong systems in place to protect them, these children worked for years and brought in millions of dollars for the network. Though the online nostalgia industrial complex will continue to mine the highlights of these shows for clicks, the public must reckon with the reality that we were watching the most vulnerable members of an industry filled with abusers.